Welcome to the Bible Forum. It's July 8, 2018. I'm Warren Sprouse. Unless you've been living in a cave down by the river, you know more and more young adult males either can't find a job or just aren't looking. Nearly 40 years ago, only 6.3% of prime age men did not work at all in the course of any given year. In 2016, that number nearly doubled. And the phrase failure to launch was then being applied to young people who didn't want to leave home, didn't want to get a job, didn't want to grow up. To a large extent, did not know how. It was the title of a movie in 2006. It grew out of 40 years of reality. With the Trump resurgence, the statistic is even worse, since every report in the last year indicates a dramatic increase in job opportunities, with a majority of employers needing more. And among the more skilled jobs, having to train job applicants to be able to do those jobs. In some cases, the training is basic enough to shame those of us who grew up normal. In other words, a record number of young people today are getting stuck in the transition between childhood and adulthood. They are not learning any skills that would help them in any job they might have. What has been called the Peter Pan syndrome, in which no boy ever has to grow up and to be a man, a situation that is a growing phenomena of 21st century America. New York Post columnist Carol Markowitz is not amused, calling it a tragic twist on the 2006 comedy, Failure to Launch. She writes, quote, "A generation of damaged boys are turning into impaired men, and as seen by the mocking coverage of this case, we're treating this development like a joke, encouraged to ridicule and to condemn them for it." That from prophecynewswatch.com. Well, inquiring minds want to know why. And the simple answer, the easy answer, is parenting, or the lack thereof. You see, we gave up parenting about 30 years ago. Prior to that, we were living off the former generation's conditioning. But the last generation able to function was probably born in the 1950s. Now, there are exceptions in every generation. But today, a large percentage of young people go to college but never graduate. Or they go to college and graduate with largely useless degrees. Degrees they're very seldom able to use. Sometimes there are degrees that aren't much better than the high school education some of us old guys got. Another large percentage doesn't see a job as important, at least not yet. We saw in the news a 30-something young man living at home with his parents. They had to take him to court and have him kicked out of their house. He wouldn't leave. We've got 30 and 40-year-olds with no marketable skills and a growing number with no desire to develop them. Markowitz in the article quotes a 2010 study that found boys have higher rates of suicide. That boys contract, I guess is probably the word that she's trying to find here, disorders, emotional disturbances, premature deaths, and juvenile delinquency. They have a higher rate of all of that than their female peers, as well as lower grades in school, lower test scores, and lower college attendance rates. Clinical psychologist Jordan Peterson calls them lost boys. Peterson, she says, is taking the place of parents who have failed to instruct their sons and is telling them to put their lives in order, even to clean up their room. My children were not allowed to have breakfast if their room was not clean, bed made, stuff put away, straightened up. If they had not taken care of their toiletries, if they are not dressed, ready for school, with their books in hand, they didn't get to eat. And they better get to eat, or they would be punished even more harshly. Terrible, wasn't it? Harsh, terrible. Simon Legree. In 1943, C.S. Lewis wrote a book entitled The Abolition of Man. In this book, he referenced those who, quote, remove the organ and demand the function, end of quote, who, quote, make men without chests and expect of them virtue and enterprise, who castrate and then bid the geldings be fruitful. The last two generations have epitomized this phenomena. What's the solution here? Do we go back to the school system? Do we have to re-educate these children? Do we have to put these people into psychological training? Do we need the schools to do something? What do we need? Well, you know what we need. We need real parents. You know, those people who are responsible adults, who are responsible to make sure their children do not just what's expected, but what is right and good and productive. Sit up straight. Eat properly with knives and forks. Learn how to hold them, not like clubs. Have manners. Make their bed every morning. Sit with the family for meals every day, every evening. Have chores that they actually must do. Accept responsibility for their toys, their clothes, their choices. You break the toy, you don't get another one. In fact, you might get punished unless it accidentally broke. This is why John Stonestreet and Brent Kunkle have written a new book entitled A Practical Guide to Culture. In it, they argue that virtue is the antidote to perpetual adolescence. Developing the daily habits and disciplines that not only prepare children to live a good life in service of others, but to develop a God-honoring, Christ-like character. Doesn't mean everybody's got to go to church and be Christian, but a God-honoring, Christ-like character. An excellent resource to help parents help their young people do just that. The book was originally published by Breakpoint.org, but I'm sure you can find it on Amazon or just about anywhere books are sold. You don't need one? You probably know somebody who does.